Hi there and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about property in Portugal, specifically things that you need to consider as a buyer of any property in Portugal before you sign on the dotted line. I guess this is going to be one of these really long videos with so many different parts, so I'm probably going to be breaking it into 2 or 3 different videos, and I'm just going to do like maybe 10 or 12 minutes worth in this video and then pick up where I left off. Alright, so first up on this list of things to consider when buying in Portugal, I'm going to put, dilapidated properties, properties which are not in great condition. I previously made another video about ruins, specifically about why not to buy a ruin, but I didn't talk too much about, fixer-uppers in Portugal. And that's kind of like a different category from a ruin. When I think of a ruin, I'm thinking about like 4 crumbling walls, no roof, and it's all overgrown with ivy and stuff. That's what I think of when I think of a ruin. When I'm thinking like dilapidated, I'm thinking very poor condition, badly maintained. Everything in there is like from the 60s or 70s, and it basically needs to be ripped out. You've probably got problems with things like dampness, and it might have rot if there's wood in the property, the roof might be saggy. All these kind of things could be considered like a property which is in poor condition. Now, again, it's the same as with the ruin. If somebody is like maybe a single guy with like lots of DIY skills and he's prepared to live there and really rough it during the process of renovation, and he can handle it himself, then yeah, maybe it's possible you might be able to pick up some real bargains. Or if you aim just to make the property basically livable, and you're not aiming for any high level of comfort or like a good standard of decoration, then yeah, maybe you could also do that. That's not what I would like to do, though. I don't think that's what most people would like to do. But if you have the ambition of like buying a rundown house in Portugal and making it beautiful, pristine again, whether it's for yourself to live there or whether you want to rent it out, I think that you need to consider it very carefully and think about, do I have the skills personally to do this, and do I have the time to do this? Because if the answer to that question is no, then you enter into the realm of having to get workers to come and do it for you, and that is a nightmare in Portugal, particularly where most of these properties would be located, which would be in rural Portugal. There's a shortage of workers. The workers are not, generally speaking, very reliable. I have had so many incidents of workers simply not turning up, companies never responding to phone calls and emails, stuff like that. It's just very, very difficult to get things done. And of course, if it's an older property and you need to do something totally new in it, like move a bathroom or put in new piping in your kitchen, you're going to need planning permission for that, and that involves the Câmara Municipal, which is a whole new level of nightmare. So, think very carefully about it. If you're attracted to a property which is in relatively poor condition because you think, that's cheap, well, it might not be cheap at the end of the day. It might actually end up costing you more money and a hell of a lot more drama than you expect. And at the end of the day, you might just say to yourself, God, I wish I bought something new, or I wish that I hadn't done that. And I know many people who are in that situation. It's not at all rare in Portugal, so it's something to be very, very aware of. Next thing I want to talk about are neighbours. Now, when you go to look at a property, don't just look at the property. Don't just look at the garden. Look at the area, especially in rural Portugal. Well, that's where I have most of my experience anyway, but I suppose the same thing applies in cities as well. Look at who is living there, what kind of condition they keep their property in, over the road, around the corner, stuff like that. There are lots of problems in Portugal involving expats and neighbours. They could be Portuguese neighbours, usually are, sometimes Brazilian neighbours. They're a bit notorious, actually, especially in my area. And you get people who do stuff which will bug you. Like, for example, burn stuff in their garden and engulf your house and your laundry that you've just hung out in smoke. They just do it, and they don't even think to mention it or consult or anything like that. They just go ahead. Shouting, screaming, the singing, music, this is a common thing. Even in the countryside, you're going to meet that. In urban areas, when I lived in Queenborough, it was far more common, and my wife and I were actually disturbed by music from a neighbouring property basically about half the nights that we were there, and it went on quite late, and the consensus among most people was, you have to call the police and they'll come and measure it with a decibel machine, maybe. Well, they never did, and nothing ever changed, and the consensus was it's just a very difficult situation to deal with and nobody really wants to do anything about it. Neighbour problems in Portugal are just awful because they're very difficult to solve. If you've got a neighbour that lives nearby and he keeps his house like a trash can, and there's just garbage all over his garden. We've got one round the corner who put like an old dishwasher in his garden, and he uses it as some kind of makeshift barbecue. And, another guy a little bit further away who stacks beer bottles on his wall. This is the kind of thing you need to pay attention to, before you buy, because after you buy, it's too late. You can't really do anything about it, or it will be a very complex and acrimonious process. So the best thing is just to stay away from this and pay attention in the first place by, walking the neighbourhood. I would suggest on different days, at different times of day. And if you can, try to speak and interact with people and ask, if you've got a buyer's agent, that would be the best thing. Ask the buyer's agent to do that for you and try and scope it out and figure out that there are not any of these kind of hidden nasty things waiting for you to find, 2 weeks after you moved in. All right, the next thing that you should probably think about when buying any property in Portugal, particularly if it is a property in the countryside, because it tends to apply to those, is simply how much land comes with this property? How much land do I want? How much land do I really need? I have found, and I myself am guilty of this, but most of the other expats in this area, in fact, all of the other expats in this area, wish they had less land. Everybody wishes they had less land. When you're buying a house, you think, I want to get this big garden, I want all this space. And you tend not to think about the fact that you have to maintain it, and often you have to pay to maintain it as well. There are some things that you can't do yourself. I'm not very capable in the garden, not at all, but I try. But there are some things I can do and some things I can't. And then there are people who get older and they're just not physically able to do things at all. And some people have like vast tracts of land, like half a hectare or something like that. It's just huge. And they buy it thinking, this is great, I'll have all this land. But then you're actually responsible for it. In Portugal, you have to keep your land clean, meaning that you can't have it be a fire hazard. So it has to be cleared, once a year, usually in April or May of every year. That's something that has to be done. And, you want to keep your land and your garden looking respectable anyway. So, I have a basically 1,900 square meter yard, and I don't know, maybe half of it is paved in some way. Like there's calçada and I put granite down. The previous owner put calçada, I put granite down, to create a driveway. And I also count a big section of it which is covered in pebbles, it's deep in pebbles, so, not so many weeds can grow through it or something. But they still have like 500 meters of garden up the back, and it's just chaos of weeds and stuff. And it has to be done like 4 times a year, and it's just a total nightmare. So my advice is this: unless you're a really, really keen gardener, and unless you have like real plans for that land, don't just go out there and buy a property that has a big piece of land or a massive garden just because you think, I really want a massive garden, or more is better. Because all it's going to be is a trouble and an expense for you in like 90% of cases. Just around me, there are people with huge gardens, like 4,000 square meter, 3,000 square meter. Everybody is full of regret. Nobody's delighted about their choice. So, everybody wants less land after they've actually got it. So it's something to think about before you sign up for buying a property with a big garden, because really it's just a waste of money and it's something which is going to cost you money in the future. The next thing is damp. Now, Portugal in the winter time is notorious for being damp. Now, one of the reasons for this is because a lot of Portuguese people don't like to open their windows. They don't like to air out their houses. So they basically keep all the windows closed, and just people breathing inside causes a lot of dampness to build up. So there are two kinds of dampness. One of them is like condensation dampness, and the other is infiltration, which is like structural dampness, water coming through the roof or water penetrating the walls or something. Neither is very attractive or, of course, very healthy. If you go to a property and you're looking around, you should definitely look for dampness and try to distinguish between the two different kinds. If you see dampness which is caused by condensation, then it's not too bad. You can get rid of the mold, and then you can basically paint over it, and as long as you ventilate the space properly, it won't recur. But if you have some kind of they call it infiltração de água in Portuguese, if you have that coming through anywhere in the house, then you have to seriously think about the property as a whole. Because in Portugal, when you get that, fixing it can be a bit of a bugger. I have had trouble with a leaky chimney, and I have a very new house. It's less than 5 years old. And the chimney, I sealed it up. I got guys in to do waterproof paint on it and all that kind of stuff. And still, occasionally, it has a little bit of a leak. And it's really annoying because I have no idea how to solve it, and it seems that the workers that I hire don't have much of an idea how to solve it. So you just don't want to get involved with damp. So if you encounter a property which has like damp patches, like water coming through the roof, water coming through the wall, and it doesn't have a quick remedy, you think it might be something but you're not exactly sure, then leave it. Because it's going to be something which is going to be problematic. It's going to come back and haunt you, and there are many other better options. Portugal is not a country which is just hot all year round, and it's not that kind of place. In the winter it is freezing. Like today, for example, the minimum temperature was 4 degrees. And problems with infiltration of water are very real here, and things like the buildup of condensation inside houses, they're very real, and there's something to be taken seriously. The fifth thing to consider, and I think this is the last one I'll do for this particular video, otherwise it will be too long, is structures, extensions and things like that might come with the property. Now, if you are buying an apartment in Lisbon or something, you're probably not going to have a problem with this. The limits of the property and the structural drawings of the property will probably be very, very clear. But if you're buying a property in a rural area, it is incredibly frequent to get to a property and find out that, there are additional structures. Could be garages, or, it could be anything. Something that people have put up. It's very common, especially Portuguese owners. They quite commonly put up different kinds of things. It can be anything from like a barbecue area to a garage to like a pool house or whatever. It is common that these things are put up without seeking the appropriate planning permissions. Now, when I built my garage last year, I went and I sought planning permission and I got it and I put it up. But that is not the way that things often work amongst many Portuguese owners. They just tend to put things up, which means that you'll get a property, part of which will be, the property shown on the plans, on the designs of the building. And then there will be additional structures which are actually illegal. And legalizing those structures may not be possible, probably will be costly, both in terms of financial cost and time cost. And it's just a lot of trouble. So it's better to avoid it. If you are going to see properties and you notice that there are these additional structures, you have to confirm that all of the structures that are present on the property are actually part of the approved plan and have received planning permission. Otherwise, you open yourself up for many, many problems down the line where you could be facing fines from the municipal authorities for having this structure on your land. Doesn't matter that you didn't build it, you bought it, it's there, it's your land, you're going to get the fine, you're going to have to deal with the consequences, you might have to pay for it to be demolished, that kind of thing. When I was looking at properties, I saw a very, very nice house which was close to Santarém. And beautiful big house, and it had like 5 or 6 additional buildings, including a completely other house, which I guess, it was like a granny flat or something, but it was like a 2-bedroom house, small 2-bedroom house on the land, and none of that. It had like sheds, garages, some kind of barn which had been used for agricultural equipment, plus this additional house, and some other smaller structures as well. Nothing had received planning permission, and this house had been built in about 2005. So it's relatively recent for Portugal, and it goes to show you the scale of the things which can just fly under the radar here. So it's something you have to be very, very careful about when you come to buy a property. Don't get caught out on this one. It could be very, very costly. Alright then, well that brings us to the conclusion of this. I hope people found the video informative, and I will see you soon in the next video.